Welcome to Pitch. For this week's episode, we're going to finish our chat with screenwriter and playwright Ed Horowitz, who also happens to be an ASCAP songwriter and a pretty darn good guitar player. That's right, Ed is also a musician, and he invited me to come sit in with his band just last night. It was a solid group of great people, and we jammed for a few hours. I had a blast, so thanks again, everyone. For today's episode, we're going to pick up where we left off from last week. Leah is pointing out what she thinks all writers have in common. Ed's going to chime in with his thoughts. Let's jump right in.
One of the character traits that all writers have in common, and maybe I'm being idealistic here, but you were telling a story about telling your father that you were going to go to school and you were going to be a writer, you were going to be a playwright, you were going to go into scripts, and his answer to you ignored. Because you had this level of personal faith. And I think it's that level of personal faith that buoys you past that midpoint crisis. And I think it's inherent almost, because we're going to move past it and we're going to drive towards what we think is the end of whatever the story is going to be. So it's this commonality between all of us that we have, that despite seeing the blank page and the crisis on the page, we're going to move past it and we're going to fight and we're going to grind.
I completely agree. There are two aspects of that. There's a thing called neoteny, and I don't know how to spell it. Neotany, I think. The loose definition is Peter Principle, but what it really is, and every artist I know in every arena has this. It's the ability to have a childlike view of the world and be in awe of the world, and as adults, this gets beat out of us by life. So what happens when you try to be a writer when you're an adult? Or there's a famous book called How to Play Piano as an Adult, because they've done studies that adults have a very hard time learning how to play piano for the same reason. When you were young, you just do it and you think it's fun. So you do not judge it. So you're like, oh, I'm in the middle. I'm stuck. Oh, this is great. I'll keep going. But when you're an adult, you're like, I'm stuck. I don't know what I'm doing. I should really be paying my taxes. I think I have to go do the dishes. I got to pick up my kids at school. Somebody's going to call me. Well, how's my mother doing? I haven't called her today. And we get so caught up in judging what we do. And this goes back to the conversation we had before we started this, which was, how do you write? And one of the things we were talking about was this need to create not just a space where we write, but the space to write, where the world is unable to touch you, so you can remove your judgment and just live in that moment. And when you're stuck is when the real work starts, because you still have to stay in that moment. That's because everyone gets stuck. You get stuck, I get stuck all the time. The difference between me and other people is I now know that if I sit there and sit with that discomfort and just allow myself to free think and free write and play guitar and wash my dishes and maybe work out, that my subconscious will continue to work until I find that solution. But you've got to allow yourself that opportunity. And you've got to, as a writer, I tell my kids this, you've got to get comfortable with discomfort. Because being a writer is to be discomfort.
Mostly.
Yeah.
Oh, every day
Mostly.
It's like, Somebody asked me, what does it mean to be a writer? I said, it means to get up every day and go, how do I have a thought today I've never had before in my life?
It's like mental yoga.
Yeah.
So what are the rewards then for you?
Oh. Well, the biggest reward is, no joke, I've never had a job in my life. I've never used an alarm to get up in the morning. I've never had to. I get up every day wanting to jump out of bed and go do it. I mean, I literally every day I just feel fulfilled. I mean, it's a lifestyle choice, but yeah, so that would be one. Two, for me, is being a writer enables me to learn. Like you were saying, you did too. You, Leah, I'm looking at you. You can't see that on the podcast, so I'm looking at.
He's looking at Leah.
But you did 2 years of research of the mafia. I mean, same thing. I love to learn. I'm curious as get out. So I will research, and as a writer, I get to call people and go, hey, you do this. Can you I'm writing this thing. Can you just tell me about this? I get to talk to people and learn, and I freaking love that. And then for me, the third thing is when it works. And I've had this experience more with theater, but I've had it a few times with some short films I did. when it connects with an audience. One of the first short films I ever wrote was for a friend of mine who was a director at AFI, and it was kind of a sci-fi thing, but it had this twist right in the middle. And when it I went to the screening, and when it happened, the entire audience leaned forward, and I was just like, I want to do this.
Yeah.
You know,
that's
just that
cool.
moment of
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh my God. You know, the other one is if you ever have the good fortune to have a big studio movie premiere and you live in California, in LA, it happens in Westwood 9 out of 10 times. It may happen in Hollywood, but my movies premiered in Westwood.
Okay.
And so I'm going to my first premiere, and I drive into Westwood, and there's a side way into Westwood, and you go over a little hill, and you come into the village. And I drove over this hill, and there are like 1,000 people and lights and press and these giant posters, and all because I had some stupid idea. And that is just somehow mind-blowing and such a thrill. Mm-hmm. And then the fourth thing is, and this is just the reality, is like, you get paid, you know, but that's the least important. I mean, yeah. I write, you know, years ago, somebody said, oh, if you won the lottery, what would you do differently? And I was like, drive a faster car, wear nicer shoes. I'd still get up tomorrow and be like, I got to finish my script, because that's what I do. I mean, yeah. Somebody said, you know, people, they must ask you, they say, do you like writing? And my response is generally, do you like breathing? Because it's just
the thing you do.
Yeah, I'll do it till I die.
Yeah.
You know, till the day I die, I'll be doing it. You know, no one will be reading it or care, but I'll be doing it.
Yeah.
Because it's just what I do. Yeah. So it's that sense of, it's literally, it's, you know, it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's like, it's self-actualization. It's just like, I get to do me.
When I'm in a bad mood, like I get kind of pissy, Angel's like, have you written recently? And I go, no, because I'll get sour in my soul if I don't write.
Yeah. No, if I start to feel like detached from myself if I'm not doing it. And, you know, writing takes many forms. Sometimes it's actually sitting down and writing. Sometimes it's thinking about story or marveling at a character or reading something.
Yeah.
You know, driving over here, I was listening to The Moth. Do you know that?
Oh, yeah. It's great.
Every time I listen to it, every time I'm just reminded of the importance of storytelling and of the human connection and of like people telling stories and why they're so captivating and interesting and necessary. Everything we learn in life and everything we teach others is a story. Everything.
You got any good Steven Seagal stories?
Yeah, we're not going to get into those.
There's a lot of stuff on Steven Seagal on the internet. He's a colorful figure from what I've been able to ascertain.
After we turn this off and you buy me a beer, I'll tell you anything you want to know.
Deal.
Fair enough.
So this has been talked about before, and the job of a writer has become more extensive. The things that are our onus to do go beyond a script. So we're writing scripts, we're doing pitch decks, we're doing treatments. Do you offer any of those classes? Are they useful things to learn? What's your advice?
Do you use any of those tools?
And do you use any of them?
Well, that's a lot of questions. Those are all great questions.
But lots.
Terry Rossio, who wrote Pirates of the Caribbean and a bunch of other stuff, I forget who his partner was. He has a great article, a great essay on treatments, and basically nobody reads them. They're a waste of time. They're a selling tool. They're not. You know, you have to. You know, they tell you just write a treatment, just get the ideas down on the page, but you can't. You have to write it so that people get it, so they buy it, because otherwise it'll turn them against it. So it ends up being this completely set. It's a selling tool. It's got nothing to do with what you're going to put in the script or what you're going to use. It's not an outline. It's a complete and utter waste of time. I'm blanking his name. The guy who wrote Top Gun, Jack Epps. He told me once that they were told that Bruckheimer and Simpson, because Simpson was still alive back then, they wanted to meet and they had this idea. They pitched him the idea and they said, we'll only write it if we don't have to write an outline. Because outlines, you know, there are tools, writers, so you need to do an outline for you, but you don't want to show it to people because it doesn't make any sense.
No.
So
It does not make any sense.
So
yeah.
I won't do, if I can avoid a treatment, I just say no. You don't need it. I mean, when I did On Deadly Ground, when I did Exit Wounds, they had a start date, they had a script that didn't work, and I got hired to fix it, and I sat down with Joel Joel Silver, and he was like, do you want to write an outline? I said, I can. It'll take 2 weeks. You'll have to read it. The studio will read it. It'll take 2 weeks, and you got a start date in 6 weeks. I said, I can write the first draft. If the first draft works, you got a movie. If not, you'll know what to do to fix it. He goes, go home. Just start writing. And that was it. I just went and wrote the script. So I really try to avoid that. So pitch decks. You got to sell the thing. That's your job. I mean, I don't see that as an onus. I mean, it's a burden because we never had to do them. But I used to have to drive from Santa Monica to Burbank in 100-degree weather and look nice and be bathed. And now instead I have to do a pitch deck. It's about the same amount of work because, you have to plan the pitch. The difference is just how do you do it? Now, I always will engage my producer. Mm-hmm. So this is the way I do pitches, is going back to when I pitch mostly character. So what I make my producer do, and if he doesn't do something, like, well, then we're not going to do the pitch because I'm just at the point where I just won't do it. And then if you want to do it, you're going to have to put some skin in the game. But I make him find who are the actors that represent these characters. And so rather than it just be me talking, as I'm pitching, we will choreograph in the pitch where he's going to put up images of locations or of characters. So we did this pitch, this one about this cop show that I was talking about earlier, where I pitched it from the point of view of the main character. So like he went up, then he stayed up. And as I pitched each person, so there's a main character, and then there was his partner. Then on his other side was his girlfriend. Then the other side of the partner was the antagonist. And the other side of his girlfriend was his mother. And then there were one or two other people. And so when we got done pitching, you were looking at the cast.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's on him. It was him because it was a male producer in this case. I find that visually it keeps people paying attention, right? Mm. So, and then what was the first part of it? There was 3 things. There was pitch decks, just more work.
The treatment, and we did the outline. We did 3.
Okay, but I do think that producers are asking more and more of writers, and they're doing it in the form of rewrites and little tweaks, and this can go on and on and on. And it's that thing of the producers say, well, we need to do this to sell it, and your goal is to sell it, and you want to do it, and you want to be a good trooper, and they're not paying you for it.
Yeah.
And it's that really loose gray area because, everybody does stuff for free. We all do. I mean, like actors, if you want to go audition, you got to put a lot of work in before you show up. You're not getting paid for that because you're trying to prove you can have the job. So I haven't had, because my career has a lot of times been speccing and selling it, or selling it in the room and then writing it. I've not been asked to do a lot of these, like I don't do a lot of, I'm going to write the script on spec and then I'm going to go through 1,000 tweaks. The one horror movie was that, but I agree with it. In that case, every time he said it's not working, I was like, man, he's right. I got to do it. And so I was compelled to do it. So I haven't personally felt that. And I feel like, as a writer, I want to write the best script I can. And so if the producers start to feel like they're going sideways, then I'll stop. There's a reason they use oxen to hoe fields and not horses, because when oxen get tired, they stop. Horses want to please and they'll work themselves to death. And you can do it. You can work yourself to death. And I've sort of more of an ox than a horse at this point. And it probably cost me work, but it's probably also saved my sanity.
Yeah. And your heart.
And my heart, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So earlier, just real quick, you said that storytelling is super important. This is something you talk to your students about. You're like, the world needs storytelling. That what we're doing is, you have this as part of your curriculum, right? Or is it just always come up because it is the core of what we're doing? And
the thing is that they're there because they want to write something. So it's sort of not talked about a lot because it's already a given.
It's inherent in them being there.
Yeah, they're there because they want to tell a story. I mean, beginning of the class, I always, just the first general class where I'm kind of rambling in a bazillion different directions, I just talk about how important story is. But I really believe in it. But, it's I'm finishing a book on screenwriting, and I talk about this. It's a book for everybody because, everybody tells stories. And people say, well, I don't really tell stories. I'm like, ever been stopped for a speeding ticket? You are immediately telling a story. No, officer, I only had 1 beer. It wasn't that. It was just a dinner party. It's a story. Or, the dog ate my homework. That's a story. You were trying to convey an idea to an audience for a reason.
You have a very clear want.
And you double down.
Yeah. You don't, Angel, you can't run in the street because if you run in the street, you could get hit by a car. That's a story.
Yeah.
That's a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
I remember when I first started riding motorcycles, every single person I ever met and found out I rode a motorcycle told me their story of their uncle who lost a leg.
Yeah.
Every single one. And I was like, I don't want to hear these stories anymore about people losing legs.
Do you still ride?
No.
But he will again.
I had many accidents and walked away unscathed.
Yeah. So I rode all through high school, all through college. And when I first came to LA, I rode for about 6 months and realized I'm going to die in LA if I keep riding because I'm impatient. And I'm going to do something stupid. So I stopped riding.
Smart man.
Yeah. And, when I'm in another country on vacation, I'll go rent a scooter, rent a motorcycle or something.
Yeah.
But this is a while ago, about 10 years ago, I decided I'm buying another bike. It's time. And there was this awesome Harley for sale out in Riverside. So I called the guy and he's like, you're the first guy. I'm like, okay, I'm coming from Santa Monica. It's going to take me I got to run an errand. It'll take me 2 hours. If I give you $1,000, will you hold it for me so I can figure out how to get it? He goes, totally. So I jump in my car, I'm driving to the bank, and my sister calls. I go, how's it going? And she goes, oh, do you remember so-and-so? My husband's best friend was on his bike at a stoplight. A guy got T-boned in a car in the intersection, spun out and killed him. And I'm like, oh, that's terrible. And I'm like, yeah. She's like, so just be careful. I'm like, okay. So
Unprompted, she called you and told you the story?
No, we had a conversation. She told me the story, right?
But she knew about you going to get the motorcycle.
No, in the conversation, I said, oh, I was going to go buy a motorcycle. She's like, oh, I don't know. I'm like, no. I'm still buying the motorcycle. So then my errand was I had to take my guitar into the luthier to fix it. And the guy's got a cast on. I'm like, what happened to you? And he's like, I laid down my motorcycle. I'm not going to play the guitar for 3 months.
No.
And I literally picked up my phone. I'm like, hey, yo, man, I'm not coming.
I'm not coming to buy that motorcycle.
Because the universe was telling me a story.
Yeah. Yep.
And the ending was, and you will die.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? But that's the thing. You have, so you have to listen to stories.
You got to listen to them.
So I did this Aspen Summer Words. I don't know if either of you are familiar with it. I know I've talked to you about it a little bit.
It's called Aspen Summer Words.
Aspen Summer Words.
Cool.
It's a writer's workshop for short stories, poems, short story writers, poets, and novelists. Every summer they do it in Aspen, and you can choose or you can submit your material and they place you. So I did the Advanced Fiction Workshop with Benjamin Percy, who is one of my favorite modern writers. And he said one of the rules that he has as a writer is minimum. He will sit down and write 2 hours a day because it takes so long to get back into the world that you're writing that he has to dedicate at least that amount of time. So other than not setting an alarm clock, what are some rules that you have for writing?
Well, I don't know if we talked this before. I think before we started, we were talking about this. Okay, so I want to say this first. I write, unless I'm forced to teach in the morning, I write Monday through Saturday at least 8:30 to 12:30 to 2. So I write a minimum of 4 to 6 hours a day. And I write in my office. I have, so what I tell people is have rituals. Find a space where you can be free to write and create the rituals to get your game your head into the game, excuse me. It's like I use, baseball players, they tap their shoes before they go in the batting cage, ballers, bounce the ball on the free throw line before they shoot. You gotta, and this, I got this from Stephen King. He talks a little bit about it on writing.
Yes.
You need to do the things that tell your brain it's time to go into creative mode. And I do that every morning. For me, it is morning coffee. That's the smell of espresso every morning tells my brain time to get creative. When I have coffee in the afternoon and the evening, it's not the same experience. But in the morning, it makes my brain go time to write. And I go into my office, and I have an office, and my desk faces the wall, not the window. And people say, oh, why don't you look out the window? It's so pretty. I'm like, because I don't want to be distracted. The wall's never moving. It catches my eye and distracts my brain. I don't want to be distracted.
That's a Mark Twain thing.
Oh, is that true?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the deal I make with myself is, no, I live alone. I have an office in my house that I stay in my office. I get out to use the bathroom and to make more coffee. If I have to watch something, I'll watch it in my living room on TV, but I'm in my office working. I'm not having fun. I'm not meeting people. I'm working. Now, I play guitar, and what I found is when I get stuck, I pick up a guitar because gives my hands something to do.
Mm-hmm.
So my conscious brain, or the other side of my brain, is focused on something else. Like Aaron Sorkin used to drive around and listen to 80s music, is what he said. And Joan Didion used to drive a loop from the 101 to the 10 to the 405 and go in circles when she was stuck, you know, in the 70s. And it's like, but you have to find a thing that allows your conscious brain to be busy so your subconscious is free. So this is what I'll do. Like, I don't have fun. It's my job is to be there and write. I don't set a set number of days for me. I set out to write, and in my head I'll be like, oh, I want to get X amount done. But every day I try to get at least 10 good pages. And then at the end of the day, I start by rewriting those 10 pages. Like, I'll finish them at night or at the end of the day. And then the next morning, the first hour will be rewriting those pages. And then the rest will be writing the next 10 pages. And 10 pages is a lot. 10 pages takes me, that's an 8-hour day.
Yeah.
And like when I'm really in the groove, you know, meaning that my outline has been completed and I'm just writing the script, I will write 8 to 6, 8 to 8, easy. I'll write 12 hours because it completely sustains me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are days where I'm writing, I forgot to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are days where I'm writing and I'm like, what's that smell? I'm like, oh, that's me because I haven't showered in about 3 days. You know, or I'll walk by a window and go, whoa, that's me because I haven't looked at myself in the mirror for 3 days. Because even when I'm in the mirror, I'm so wrapped in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I really live in my head. I used to do these short plays once a month for this theater festival, and we used to write in a little restaurant. And one day the producer says, do you know you're talking to yourself? I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you were talking out your entire, like, evidently I mumble my dialogue when my characters are talking. I never knew this. And, you know, that's just part of the thing. But so that's my rule. My rule is like, so what I tell young writers, because I'm a professional, I do it, I make my living this way so I don't have the encumbrance of a day job, is if you have a day job, try to write at least 3 days a week. And at least for 1 to 2 hours at a time. And the reason for this is if you write 1 day a week and you have a bad day, you've had a bad week. Mm-hmm. If you write 5 days a week and you have 2 bad days, you still had a pretty good week. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I tell them. And the other thing I tell my students is you got to think about writing like baseball. The greatest hitters in baseball bat about 320. What that means is 70% of the time, they are not hitting the ball. But every time they get up to bat, their goal is to hit it out of the park. And you have to write. You have to know that even though 70% of the time you're going to probably write dreck, your job is to get up and write it for the 3 out of 10 days when you write great stuff.
Absolutely.
And then the other thing is, Angel, you were talking a little bit about, you know, how do you get past the judgment? I give beginning writers and in-season writers an exercise, which is when you get stuck. Somebody told it to me. I found it really helped me, so I don't really need it anymore. But when I used to get stuck, I could feel blocked. It's because I don't have the solution. And rather than leaning into the discomfort of not knowing and allowing that to exist, I start thinking about how I'm going to fail. Like, it used to be my grandmother's voice, literally, in my head, yelling at me. You should have been a doctor. What's wrong with you? Blah, blah, blah. You know. So what I do is I tell people, set a timer for a minute. And just write whatever you're thinking in your head about whatever. Right? If you're writing about if you're thinking about your script, write about your script. If you're thinking about your grandmother yelling at you, your mom or your dad, write that. And when you're done, delete it. Don't read it. And you do this every day. This is a great way to start because what it does is it teaches you to not judge your work till after you're done. Then you delete it before you can judge it. So it also teaches you how to write while postponing judgment, which is what you need to do to get past the block. And since I figured that out, I never feel blocked. When I'm stuck, it means I don't know. Blockage is what happens when I don't know the answer and then I start punishing myself for not having the answer. But when you write, you don't know. We're searching for answers. And so sometimes we just don't know what they are and we have to allow our brains the time. I mean, when we wrote On Deadly Ground, we were 4 months into we were about 3 months into writing, and my manager, Jeff, said, I can sell this movie. This character is perfect. This guy is a perfect movie star. The problem is I don't understand what the bad guys are doing. It took us 3 months to figure out a plausible reason for that an oil company would allow an oil spill to happen. 3 months. And my writing partner, thank God I had a writing partner at that time, because he would come over or I would go to his house and we would sit there and I could look at him, and he was a Rhodes Scholar. He had me, which is, I'm a Berkeley grad. It's not the same. And I could go, wow, this Rhodes Scholar can't figure out this problem. I'm not so dumb. But that's the thing. You have to allow yourself to struggle and be okay and not let it daunt you.
Yeah.
If until you find it, because if you throw enough shit at the wall, something will stick. And once you do, it's obvious.
Oh yeah.
Do you figure out your endings before you start?
Yes. Well, they may change.
But you have a destination in mind, even if it's going to change before you start?
If I don't have a destination, I cannot start.
Yeah.
A friend of mine once said, you cannot drive a parked car. And if your car isn't moving, if you don't have a destination, your car's not moving, you can turn the steering wheel all you want, you're not going anywhere. And if you're going the wrong direction, you can always turn around and go another way. So I always, when I teach in feature writing or in this, you got to know your main character and you got to know your beginning, middle, and end. You got to know where your character starts. You may not know most of the middle, but you got to know where the character ends. And then the other thing you have to understand, if you're going to write a dramatic story, meaning something that's dramatized, again, a script, what is the change that happens at the end? Something has to change. Otherwise, you have not told me a story. You've told me about a lot of events, but nothing has been dramatized, because in a dramatic story where conflict occurs, conflict causes change. And this is my argument for why drama's never going to go away and why AI is never going to replace writers, dramatic writers.
Okay.
The human condition is change. We are all changing, literally with every breath. And in a great script, the change is happening with every word a character utters, every line of action is change. And when you create a story that's that tight and the change is that consistent, your audience, your reader can feel it, and they feel like they are watching the world, and they identify it because they are living that exact same thing. It doesn't matter who the character is. I mean, the example I use in my class is Moonlight, which is one of my favorite movies. Okay, that's about a young, poor, gay, black kid in Miami, Florida. I am an old, white, straight dude I was raised in Northern California in a very upper middle class family. What do I have in common with that kid? Nothing, except that kid is struggling to find love, which is the human condition, and we all do. So I totally am with that kid every step of the way.
Yes.
And that's it. And that's a great script, is a document of change over time.
Yes.
And that's, if you can find that in every moment in your script, it will be a page turner, and that's what will sell.
Okay, so I only have 2 more questions.
Okay.
And this one, it's kind of generic, but I think that you can give a pretty good answer to it. What's something that you wish you would have known at the beginning that you know now?
Wow. A bunch of things.
Yeah.
A bunch of things. I think you said it earlier, networking is unbelievably important. I did not really understand that. I just thought, I will write and I will be a good writer and I'll be respected by my peers and I will write good stuff and sell it. And I don't think the business works that way anymore. About 15 years ago, Chris McQuarrie actually wrote an article saying I could not sell a spec script if I wrote it today. And it's true. The business has changed. It's not about the story anymore. It's about the auspices, the characters, the IP, the concepts. It's not the writing. So this has become a business of who knows you. And so networking is unbelievably important. And that's what I tell my kids. I did not know that. The other thing that I wish I had known when I started was that it will be okay, because I came to writing with a lot of fear and anxiety and judgment. I think a lot of people do, and we've talked about this in different ways throughout the day, that it's people who can get over their fear, get past the judgment, who have the drive to do it no matter how many times they get knocked down. They're the ones that succeed. And I guess I had that because I'm still here, but I wasn't conscious of it, and there were many years with a lot of anxiety and stress that if I'd known better or I'd known more, I wouldn't have sweat. And the third thing is what I didn't know that I do know now is that a successful writer is one who writes well and is in control of their craft, not one who gets rich. If you think getting rich is going to make you a good writer or make you happy, you're not ever going to be a happy camper, because the ability to write well and put on the page what you envision and have it affect somebody is a really powerful and rewarding thing. Yes, the money is nice and it really helps, but it's not really rewarding. If you're just doing it for the money, you're going to end up burned out and it's going to feel callow and hollow and you're not going to be fulfilled. And the whole point of doing this is to find some kind of joy, or you're not really communicating with people.
Yeah. I think I'm going to add one, which is time. I think a lot of new writers come in thinking it's going to happen like that because their version of what life is shorter.
Yes.
I'm assuming that they're younger, right? And so they think there is only a certain amount of time before I'm going to make it, but you got to put in like 7-10 years before you have like the success that you think that you're going to have.
An executive said to me early on, screenwriting is a marathon, not a sprint. And at the time I did not understand it. And you are absolutely right. It is a marathon. It is a step by step. It's a long road. And the other thing I learned in graduate school, but I didn't really understand until later, and this goes back to a little bit what you and I, what we were talking about a minute ago, is that the power of no.
Yes.
You know, as writers, we want to please and we want to get paid and we get strung along. And sometimes the fastest way to get paid or to actually accomplish something is to put your foot down and put your career on the line and just say no. Yeah. I learned it the hard way. I had an experience where I learned that and I got what I wanted, but I didn't really understand that as now, when people ask me to do stuff, I say no if I don't want to do it. Now, I've lost some work that way, but on the other hand, I've also kept my sanity. I think that's what you said when I said it before. Years ago, long story short, I came with an idea after having a conversation with the director, and we had the same agent, and the director, I called my agent and he's like, we can sell that idea. Yeah, Dave can direct it. We'll do it together. It'll be great. And this director, because we worked out in the meeting, he wanted to get creative by credit with me. And I was like, no, you're attached as the director. You get your residual for that. I'm the creator. I get my residual for that. And it became this big fight between us and with my agent. My agent called me and said, look, do you want to do it or not? And I thought long and hard. And I thought, if I sell this show and I have to give him half of that money every week, I will kill myself. And I said, I'm not going to sell it. Let's just move on.
Yeah.
And I don't regret it to this day.
How did they receive that? Did it cause problems, or is that relationship burned?
No. Well, no, you know, the agent was just annoyed that the director and I were fighting, but that was sort of the dynamic that existed in that universe. And the director and I went on and did other stuff. We just let that one go. Another time, I was approached by a guy who I was good friends with, who at the time was managing Steven Seagal. And he was like, look, if you let me manage you, you can write his next movie and then you can write and direct his movie after that. And I wanted to direct, and that was a big paycheck, you know. And I was like, you know, I worked too hard to get out of that ghetto, and I don't want to go back. And like, as much as I need the money, it's not where I want. And so I said no, and I don't regret that either. I mean, I'd have a bigger house, and I'd probably drive a faster car, but I probably would have an ulcer and maybe a heart attack or two. So, you know,
yeah,
I think I'm going to go with mental health.
Be an ox, not a horse.
Be an ox, not a horse.
Be an ox, not a horse.
I may have to get that tattooed.
You might like create shirts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be an ox, not a horse.
Or it could be the title of your next book, which is coming out, or you're working on it right now.
It's not coming out because I haven't showed it to anybody in terms of publishers. Yeah, it's a book on screenwriting. I may have to change the title. I really like that.
It's good.
But it's basically how to write a great script, and it's everything we've talked about, and it's just derived from all my years of teaching, and it's just kind of walks through all the fundamentals, starting with beginning, middle, and ends, and character, and thesis, and concept, through the steps you need to do to write a good first draft. And when I say a good first draft, having all the essential elements of a story. There's a thing that I created called the 9 C's, which is nothing new. It's just my way of labeling it that I'm not going to explain here because you have to buy the book at some point. But it sort of lays out, it's a sort of a distillation of everything everyone else, from Joseph Campbell to Plato to every other screenwriting book, has tried to distill just a way. I just put it together in a way that I thought was easy to remember because I would grow my students on it. But it's sort of, if you can answer these 9 questions or provide these 9 elements, you've got your beginning, your middle, and end, and it gives you the structure. I work in a 4-act structure rather than 3 because I find that people talk about Act 2 in a traditional structure as being twice as long, and I'm like, if you just break it into 4 acts, you got 4 equal chunks, and each one of those has a midpoint. And now all you have to really figure out is how do I get from page 1 to page 15, and then from 15 to 30, instead of how do I get from the beginning, page 30 to page 90.
Yeah.
So I use that. I think that's a way of breaking it down. And we were talking about music on a break, and music is mathematical. It's all numbers. It's not how you create it, but how it relates to each other. And storytelling is fundamentally numbers at the end of the day, how things fit together and where things pace out in a story. So it's all about that. And then there's stuff on how to deal with notes and how to do rewrites and all of that. And I'm trying to make it somewhat breezy. And I don't think I swear in it, but it's pretty much the same tone as this podcast. I tried. It's not fancy. It's not highfalutin. Sure, I use a few big words here and there, but really it's trying to talk to people on just like we're having a conversation, tell you what you need to do to write, kind of like this podcast.
Yeah. And what's your expected timeline for that coming out? 2024 or even further out from now?
God, well, now that I have to rewrite the intro because I'm changing the title. I got a couple of notes last week just on like kind of how to put it together. So I have to just mess with the format a little bit, but it's not content, so it'll be easy. And then I got to show it to people. I don't know how... Those publishing takes a long time. I may end up self-publishing it just because it'll be faster and easier. Yeah. So probably be 2024, maybe. Okay. In a perfect world, it'd be great if I got it out in time for Christmas. But and it's geared towards everybody. I mean, the thing about all serious. We were talking about musicians earlier, but all serious artists of any kind is all serious artists know that there's plenty more to learn and want to learn more and want to get better. So this is a book for everybody, whether you're starting out or whether you've written a million scripts and you just need somebody to give you a different take on how to look at it. I'll tell you, like On Writing by Stephen King, it's not about screenwriting, but it's the best book on writing I've ever read.
Yeah, it's really good.
Linda Seeger's book, How to Make a Good Script Great. I've read that book about 14 times. It's just, it just breaks down story structure and how it works, and it's phenomenal. And there's a book called The Art of Dramatic Writing by Laus Egri, E-G-R-I, that is written in the early 60s. It's about theater. And all the examples are just the dullest place you've ever read in your life. So I tell my students, read the text, forget the example. It's some of the greatest texts on how to construct dramatic writing. Yeah. And I recommend that. And then the last book I recommend, which is in the greater world, it's a little bit controversial, but I think for screenwriting, it's really great, is Elements of Style by E.B. White and William Strunk, the 4th edition. Because just the way that sort of, his emphasis is on clarity and specificity. And I just think that's so important for screenwriting. And so those are sort of like the 4 books I go back to. And so I'm not going to get there, but that's what I'm shooting for.
Can I throw one at you?
Yeah, please.
So Benjamin Percy, whose Summer Aspen Words workshop I took, has a book called Thrill Me.
I don't know it. Okay, I will check it out.
It's great.
There's one more book I read, and I'm not going to get the name right. I can't remember what it's called, but it's a fascinating book. It talks about how the human brain works and how it relates to story, and how the human brain biologically through evolution is designed to find structure and patterns in things, and how you can use that in storytelling to create narrative structure and then upend it and change it. And one of the things it talks about is that people need 3 specific pieces of information to envision something. So when you're writing your characters, you need to give your reader 3 specific. If you give less than 3, they can't conjure the image in their head. If you give more than 3, they get confused. When you describe a location, it's a great read, and it's really fascinating.
I think what we do is, you're on social media?
Barely.
We need to tweet out the title of that book.
Yeah, we can tweet it. We can figure it out and tweet it.
We can figure it out. And
I think what we need to do is I'll go home and text it to you, and you can tweet it out.
Deal.
Fair enough. Okay, done. That's a deal.
Those are all of my questions.
Cool. Well, this has been fantastic. Did you have anything else you wanted to cover that we didn't ask about or that you were expected to go deep into?
We'll do another podcast with you.
You know how versed in our podcast you are, so what are we missing?
What he means by that is I have only listened to a few. No, is there? I didn't come with any expectations. As I said to you before we started, I really think what you guys are doing is really interesting and great, and I was just happy to be along for the ride. So thanks for having me. And it was really pleasurable and really fun and interesting and some great questions. I guess the only thing I would just, if I had anything left to say is, somebody once said to me when I was trying to decide what to do with my life, they said, I will tell you what Ray Bradbury said to me. Ray Bradbury, the great fiction writer of science fiction. Everyone flies through the sky talking about writing until they fall to the ground, and writers write. And that's really it. Writers write. You want to be a writer, books are great, these podcasts are great, but all you have to do is put your butt in a chair and do it. And if you don't, you have no one to blame but you.
Unless you're Dalton Trumbo, in which case you're going to sit in a bathtub.
This is true too. Or you're someone else we know who sits in the backseat of her car.
Names will not be mentioned, but what a fantastic chat, man. This has been a real pleasure.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks.
You've
It's
answered
great.
so many of my personal questions, and you've not just questions I didn't know, but like you've verified things that I've been looking for verification on.
Well, Angel,
Which
do you
is
have any more
really helpful.
questions? Just write them on a $20 bill and send them to me. And I'll be happy to answer
I
them.
will FedEx those over weekly.
Done deal, brother.
Well, thanks again, Ed. This has been great. And I guess for myself, cheers from Hollywood.
Cheers from Hollywood.
I'd like to say a huge thanks to Ed Horowitz again. And thank you for listening. If you're on the fence about subscribing, know that a portion of all subscription fees go toward the nonprofit Young Storytellers, raising voices one story at a time. We here at Pitch support and stand in solidarity with the members of the WGA and everyone supporting their current fight for fair compensation and their rightful place in the future of film, television, and streaming content production. Head over to WGA.org to find out more and how you can support as well.